Regina Renee.
Regina Renee.
Hi, Isis. Hello, everyone.
Hey, Regina Renee.
Oops.
Yay, Brooklyn, New York. I love Brooklyn.
How to do this? Oh, right. Sorry.
You did the same thing I just did.
I also did the same thing that I did for the past like 2 shows. Okay.
Hello, Veronica from Queens.
And this is a random aside, and I'm sorry, like I should have said this before on live. Jennifer, since I see you, you did win the SistahSciFi gift card, and we're getting it into your inbox today.
Jennifer Surprise.
We're just going to wait a few minutes until we hear less beeps as people enter.
Hey, Danielle from Cleveland. I love it. We're all over the country. Is there anybody from outside the U.S. today?
Nikita.
All right. Yes, Nikita from Guyana, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm in Toronto. Is there anybody?
Isis, get your life together. I'm sorry.
I forget myself. I'm like, she's on my time. No, she's awake before I'm awake. But she's on my time. So like that's like you're on the east side of me. And
Okay, I'm gonna start. Okay, so why don't we? Are we good to start, Isis, Sade, and Tati?
yes, I'm good.
Okay, let me just turn off the entry chimes.
I have it up still. So
okay. Okay, Sade, can you please start us off with the first slide? Today is super exciting. This is a special day. This is awesome. So hi everyone. Welcome to the Octavia E. Butler's Slow Read live show. This is a super special live show for a couple of reasons. First of all, it is the end of the Patternmaster series. This is the first series that we read as a group, and that's super exciting. It is also exciting, surprise, because we have B. Steadwell here with us again. So for those of you who came to the Wild Seed live show, B was with us and they graced us with the gorgeous, haunting music that was inspired by Wild Seed, and they've done it again. So we are going to have a wonderful time today celebrating Patternmaster, the end of the series, and just reading in community. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Very, very excited that we're all here. So we can go to the next slide. Tati, you're on mute.
This is our dedication to the wonderful Octavia Estelle Butler. You wrote for freedom, yours and ours. We honor this when we read slowly, luxuriously, and collectively, exactly as you had imagined. We are your legacy.
So the agenda for today is welcome. So we're doing that. Tati just read the dedication. Njeri will walk us through the group agreement so we can create a safe space for our conversation. Then we'll kick off the book chat. So it'll start with each of us as hosts reflecting on our thoughts of the book of Patternmaster. Then we'll break out into 5 breakout rooms to discuss the book in smaller groups. Then we'll have a musical interlude by the talented B. Steadwell as sound circles. And we'll close out with group selfies with our copies of the book if you have the standalone version or the omnibus version. And then we'll have OAB announcements about next books, read-alongs, and other fun stuff.
You muted.
Okay, let me just get, if I can do this quickly. Yes. Okay, so we wanted to start off with some gratitude because like last time, we have some additional members of the OEB Slow Read family. So I will introduce Sade. Sade is our, as I've learned from ISIS, the term digital alchemy. So Sade is our digital alchemist today. So thank you. Sade offers support in virtual events, digital marketing and admin, particularly for Black-owned businesses, nonprofits, and creative endeavors. Sade uses they, them pronouns. And so welcome, Sade, and thank you very much for being with us once again today. And if anybody wants more business information about Sade, you can always email us after and we can share that information if it's available.
We also have joining us Nikita Blair, who is a speculative fiction writer, book reviewer for the Starbrook News and blogger at blairviews.com. Her essays and articles have been featured in Moray House's Kauai magazine, the Guyana Annual, the 2019 edition, the Starbrook News, the Writers' Room, and the Commonwealth Writers Blog. Her fiction has been longlisted for the 2020 Commonwealth Writers Short Story Competition and shortlisted for the 2020 Guyana Annual Open Short Story Competition. I did not know this, Nikita. Holy bejeebers. She is a former CW, the Commonwealth Writers Workshop participant and the creative nonfiction in 2019 and short fiction in 2020. And she's also participated in both the Commonwealth Writers and Science Fiction Writers Association mentorship programs in 2020, where she studied under Barbadian author Dr. Karen Lord and Nigerian author Sunyi Davies Okunboya, respectively. She has a degree in communication studies from the University of Guyana. So welcome, Nikita, as a facilitator, and thank you.
Thank you too, Tati.
And then our other facilitator, our last but definitely not least facilitator we are familiar with, as she's worked with us before, is Regina Renee Ward. Regina Renee is a public librarian and former public school teacher. She is passionate about social justice, intellectual freedom, reading, and labyrinths. Books are her love language.
So you will be familiar with our group agreement. It is the same from the very beginning. We remember that all that you touch, you change, all that you change, changes you. And so it's very important that as we're connecting in this space, reading these books and creating community together, that we do so mindfully. So here's our group agreement. First, center BIPOC voices. So the voices of Black and Indigenous folks and people of color will be centered in this space. Please speak mindfully, share space. Hatred will not be tolerated, so any propagators of racism, transphobia, and other forms of hatred will be removed, no questions asked, and will not be able to return. And share responsibly, so ask for permission before you share another person's image, comments, or any form of private information. On that note, if you find yourself in, this time it's going to be ISIS's group on YouTube, note that the conversation in the small group discussion will be recorded. And so we can manage if there are any issues around that. So those are our group agreements. And if you use the reaction button, either a thumbs up or a heart or something to signify your agreement with the group agreement, that would be great. If you find yourself in a position not able to agree to this, then please take your leave now. see you next time. But there we are. So thank you very much, and we can move on. You're on mute, Tati.
All right. Also, at the end of our group discussion, we will come back together, and you want to make sure that you have your books ready so that we can take our group selfie, our ceremonial group selfie. You want to also make sure that you have flagged a short excerpt to share in the sound circle. And please keep in mind, we are discussing. This is not a review. We are fully discussing Patternmaster, and therefore since it's the final book in this series, any information that we think is important that we've heard or read in the previous books may also come up in the discussions. So there will be spoilers galore. And also, if you notice something, say something. Just like we said previously in the agreements, we are going to respect each other and treat each other well. So if you notice that that is not happening, say something. We got you.
So we're currently reading the Patternmaster series. We are in the last book. Overall, this series tells us about the secret history during the ancient Egypt. Wow, let me just read it. The Patternmaster series is a group of science fiction novels that details a secret history continuing from the ancient Egyptian period to the far future that involves telepathic mind control and an extraterrestrial plague, but also so much more, as we're going to be getting into today. As you know, we read the books in chronological order, which means that today, because we're talking about the last book, this is an opportunity not only to talk about Patternmaster, but also to talk about the series as a whole. So just opening that invitation to everyone here today. Isis, do you mind reading this one?
Sure, no problem. So Patternmaster in brief. Patternmaster, the first book to be published, but the last in the series in chronology, depicts a distant future where the human race has been sharply divided amongst the dominant patternists and their enemies, the quote-unquote diseased animalistic clays arc, and the enslaved human mutes. The patternists, bred for intelligence and psychic abilities, are networked telepaths. They are ruled by the most powerful telepath, known as the Patternmaster. The Patternmaster tells the coming-age story of Touré, a young patternist who learns that he is the son of the Patternmaster. Touré fights for a position within the Patternist society and eventually for the role of Patternmaster. To do a quick tie-back, Clay's arcs, they're the diseased humans because the Clay's arcs disease, which came up in book 3 in the series, and then speaking of breed, this is a breeding experiment that starts in Wild Seed and continues in Mind of My Mind. And the first Patternmaster we meet as Mary in Mind of My Mind. So that's how Patternmaster ties into the other books in the series. Survivor, we go off planet for a while, so the links are a little more nuanced.
Thank you. All right, so here we go. So who wants to start first in terms of our feedback on the book?
I'll start. One of the things that I was sharing with Isis before we started allowing you all into the actual Zoom was that in reading, this is one of the last 2 books in Octavia's bibliography that I had not read. And so a lot of times when hearing people talk about Patternmaster, they read it without having read anything else in the Patternmaster series, and they talked about how much they loved it. And as I was reading it, I was like, it was hard for me to understand how they could love it so much without having read the Patternmaster series, considering how much of the past is alluded to and spoken about in Patternmaster. We are back with another Doro type individual in Currency, and he has this whole, I don't want to use the word plantation, but that's really what it felt like to me. The whole setup of this society that he's created with, and how he chooses to use Patternmaster, or not, excuse me, how he chooses to use other patternists based on their abilities as well as the mutes, and how different it is to see the mutes in this book versus the mutes in Survivor, who were not happy with the way that they were treated prior to them leaving Earth and going to this other, this other planet. So getting all of that and thinking through that as I read the book, I also had to think about and take in how much the Clay arcs had changed from Clay's arc. Because in Clay's arc, they are just amongst themselves. They're trying to stay within this area that they are populating and not spread. And then, oops, spreading happens. And now there's a pandemic. And so now they're as widespread, while the patternists have pretty much spread out, but they stayed within their communities. The Clay arcs seem to be much more spread out, widespread, and in short, smaller communities than the patternists. Yet they managed in some ways to be a more formidable force against the patternists because they can't be read. They don't know how to, the patternists don't know how to manipulate the Clay arcs like they can manipulate the mutes, because their mental Josh, help me. Their minds are different than the minds of the mutes. So having all of that, there was so much. I really felt like in rereading the other books for our discussion to participate and be able to facilitate, I really did feel like I was reading them to prepare to facilitate. This is the book that I read as just a reader, to thoroughly enjoy it and absorb this information and then ruminate and think about it later. And I appreciated the ability to do that, the freedom to do that. And as much as I was annoyed by Currency as a character, and as much as I wanted so much more for T-Ray and for Amber, and how they went out on their own, and the whole time they're on this journey, you just want them to get there. You want them to get there without any, obstacles outside of the Clay arcs, but we know that that's not how Octavia treats us. So that I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop as well. But being able to just fall into this story and see the landscape and imagine what they're going through. And then the thought that it's like the far future from when Octavia wrote this, but it's not. From here, a whole nother mental situation, a whole nother mental situation happening. But I thoroughly enjoyed this. I am looking forward to rereading this after some time has passed and trying to read it from the mindset of not thinking about all of the pieces of the previous 4 novels. So I can kind of get how other people, got to this point without having read that. I don't know how I would have enjoyed this if I had not read Wild Seed and Mind of My Mind and Clay's Art, to be able to make the comparison between Mary and Currency, and how Mary, even though she didn't want the power, understood that she had to take the mantle, but Currency wanted nothing but the power. And to see those differences in community and how those people related. We also still the patternists have not changed in how they are not able to stay in community with each other, because we have Currency and T-Ray who are separated as kids from their parents. That whole situation is still happening, and we're years, decades after the creation of the pattern, where we're supposed to be able to be in community better than they were in Wild Seed. So to see all of these things that have grown, but yet in some ways are still disjointed, and to see, as much as Doro wanted this great community, there are still flaws. His idea and desire for some kind of utopia for himself, utopia with him as ruler and leader who could do whatever the fuck he wanted to everybody who's there, how it still is real greatly imperfect, and still has a lot to grow on. And yes, thank you. Centuries later. I didn't want to say centuries because I'm an exaggerator, and I didn't know if that was like the actual thing. Centuries later. So yeah, those are my thoughts, disjointed as they may be. You have them.
No, I appreciate all of those thoughts, Tati. And they really kind of spoke to like the salient themes in the book. So as any book by Butler, like there's that theme of power and that balance between like your liberation and giving up control. So that's something that Teray has to face. We see how his mentor has made that decision. That parallels to like decisions that we saw in Wall Street. We'll see it again in the Exogenesis series. So to me, it's always fascinating, like how characters in Octavia Butler's books make those decisions, and then I put myself in their shoes and like, would I make those same decisions? And it's always like a question for me. For me, the first time I read it, two things were very jarring, like how hierarchical the society was. I was like, oh, this, call me Lord, they're masters, you're an outsider, you can never advance. And how precarious your station could be. Like, even as a housemaster, somebody more powerful in your house can challenge you and you can be houseless. And anybody else, like something can happen and you can be an outsider, and that's just within the Patternmaster society. And then you have all the Clay's arcs. So that was very interesting. Also for me, particularly the first time I read it, is to be centuries in the future and have technology taken so far back, despite the evolution of Patternmasters. Like, you can literally have an idea and dump all your learning and training into somebody else's mind, which would make me think that technology would advance leaps and bounds. But since it's so hierarchical and there's like this constant power struggle, they're just like surviving, right? Like, they're going back to a very agrarian way of living. They're using horses for transportation. Yes. So to me, that was very fascinating. It was like, with all this connectivity, I just expected leaps and bounds in technology. Something I think because of COVID and the importance of connectivity that I leaned into more this time was that connection, particularly between Teray and Amber, and how that connection made them stronger, and how they valued that connection on an emotional level. So that really like landed with me in a very different way. Like, I really appreciated that story. And I guess one thing I fear is, like, as we saw the development of what Mary thought she was fighting for in terms of fighting for the Patternists under Duro's totalitarian regime, and then how much sympathy we had for the Clay's arcs when we met them in Clay arc, and what they are now is, what will Teray become? Like, will he still stay moral? Or is this just like the early stages of a future Doro or some other very corrupt leader? Is it the power that will just eventually corrupt anybody in any system? So that's what came up for me. I definitely, the rereads I've done this far, except for maybe Wall Street, this is the one that I enjoyed the most. So yeah. And with that, I'll hand it over to Njeri.
Thanks. This was I think this was a first read for me, because I don't remember the story from before. I definitely enjoyed it. So on a very sort of surface level, I love the road trip aspect of it. I love the, like, we're trying to get from A to B. That was very exhilarating. I was rooting for Teray and Amber. I was sad for Iray because I feel like she got a really, really bad deal. And even though she eventually made a decision to be okay with being with Karansi, I feel like we didn't have enough of her thinking. We got like a page of her being like, oh, well, I didn't want to at first, but it's working. And that was it. So we didn't really get enough time to sit with Iray. So I felt like that I wasn't really satisfied with that. But after we started to follow Teray and Amber, I felt really excited. I wanted more of a connection between the clay arcs and Teray and Amber, because after that first meeting with the clay arc, the meeting between Teray and the clay arc, and the one that had the gun, I was like, why did Octavia Butler give us that interaction? And I thought that she gave us that interaction to tell us, you know what, the clay arcs are more than what the patternists think they are. We shouldn't take the patternist point of view for granted. And here's an opportunity so that the reader can decide for themselves who the clay arcs actually are. But then we never saw that particular clay arc again. And I thought we would. I wondered if that clay arc was a sniper, or if they would play a particular role. And then we didn't really get, I thought that when Carancy's people ran into Teray and Amber and the clay arcs, I thought that would have been an opportunity for us to sort of see them engage. We didn't see that. So I guess I'm kind of left thinking about the clay arcs, right? For me, the Patternmaster has got me thinking about, what have we learned about the clay arcs? What is still not explained about them as a marginalized society within the entire series? Given that we know where the clay arcs came from and what their origin story was, which people in the past would not have known had they just read Patternmaster first, like, what does that help us understand? And I think the thing that I want to sort of talk about more in the small groups, because these 2 points have left their imprint on me. One is Amber's queerness. So Amber is a queer person who identifies as a woman, from what we can tell. She has lovers who are male. She has lovers who are female. She may have non-binary lovers. We didn't get the full gender spectrum in this particular book. But she's also, in addition to that, she's an independent, and she guards her independence fiercely. And that was really interesting to me. And I felt like I hadn't seen a character like Amber since Anyanwu. And I mean Anyanwu and not Emma. And so I was really intrigued by Amber also as a healer. There were so many similarities I found between how Amber does her thing and how Amber lives her life, and how Anyanwu did in Wildseed. And so Amber intrigues me very much. So I want to talk about that if people want to talk about that. The other thing that is left with me is what it means to create a society that disables. And by that, I mean, like, we see the clay arcs, right? They are described as being diseased beings. But that is only from the perspective of certain communities, right? If we look at the clay arcs from the clay arcs' own perspective, and if we compare how the clay arcs are described in Patternmaster with how they were described in Clay's arc, like how Jacob was beautiful and sphinx-like and powerful and fast and empathetic, and how he saved Kira, I think, one of the sisters, and helped her get out, like, just strategic. And then we see some of the strategy in Patternmaster. I just feel like there is a lot to talk about in terms of how we divide people into categories, set those categories up around hierarchies of ability, and how those are fictions, right? We are encouraged to see the world through the eyes of the patternists, or those with psychic abilities. And in one of the discussion questions in this version of the book is this: many of us would be considered quote unquote mutes if we were put in this story, right? So how does that help us discuss the book and understand the way society is organized there? And how does it get us to think about the clay arcs? So I'm so pleased that we're done the series. I enjoyed Patternmaster. It left me with a lot of questions. In a lot of ways, I do feel like the series is complete, but there is more that's kind of lingering for me. But after reading Octavia Butler for as long as we have, we know that she's not going to, answer everything for us. And part of her job is to provoke. And so I remain provoked. So that's that. So Sade, do you want to put us, can you share the presentation again? So as you know, there were a group of us that slow read together on YouTube for 3 sessions. So we read Patternmaster as a group, and there were some things that were overheard in the slow read session. So just to kind of weave in those discussions with our discussion here, one was a comment that was made, if the pattern must exist, then ... And I want to attribute that comment to Maria, because that comment really got me thinking about, like, number one, the pattern as a certainty, but also it got me thinking about the patterns that we have to just accept right now in our lives. And so if those patterns must exist, then what? Also, there's another comment, please, I need to know more about this modern day Claire culture. So that was really compelling as well. And then finally, I think that was Nikita, I think that was your comment. And then finally, I think this was Kim. Per Real, the two of them provided balance in the pattern, so they had to both survive. I do want a story about Amber with a throwback to Anyanwu. So those are some of the comments that came up during the slow read. And of course, if you want to join us for future slow reads, you're totally welcome to do so. Okay, is there anything else that you think we need to talk about before we split up into small groups? Sade, can you remove the presentation? Thanks. And I'll put us back into gallery mode. Are we good to split up?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, I unmuted myself. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we are gonna split up into 5 groups. So the facilitators are going to be Regina Renee, Nikita. Is Regina Renee here?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm here. I just don't turn on my camera until after the recordings. So
Okay.
we're in a small group.
Okay. So Regina Renee and Nikita, Isis, Tati, and myself. And Isis's group will be the group that'll be on YouTube. So Sade, do you want to split us up?
Sure, give me a few moments.
Okay, we left 45 minutes for the discussion this time, and I'll pass it over to you, Isis, to chat about how we're going to manage the YouTube.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so my group will hit our breakout room, and then we'll just leave that breakout room and come back to the main room. And that way we'll stream to YouTube. It'll be fun. And then also just bear with me because, wait, Tati, are you responding to the comments, or should I speak to the comments in YouTube? So I'll also have the YouTube comments up and bringing that into our discussion for folks watching in YouTube land.
And make sure that when you go to exit the breakout room, you click leave breakout room, not leave meeting. If you click leave meeting and you come back in, you're going to end up back on YouTube with everybody else. But to keep that little hiccup from happening.
Exactly. If for some reason you end up in like my room, but you're like, I don't want my thoughts to be broadcast to YouTube, we'll let Sade know and we'll put you in a different room. Okie dokie.
Sorry it's taking a little bit longer, just I'm trying to remember who the other two facilitators are, but almost done.
No problem. I'll put it in the chat.
Does anybody want to add a thought before we break into groups?
I would like to add that I am really, really looking forward to the breakout room because now that we have 5 facilitators, I know there are a few of us, I don't have this issue, obviously, of being camera shy and not liking to speak in big groups. So now that we have smaller groups, there will be more of you who will be able and available and willing to verbally share and show us your beautiful faces while we're talking. So I am looking forward to this whole discussion situation. So I hope you all are too, because this is like one of the best parts of the slow read.
So there, there are 3 people, maybe more, who have in the chats who have just said they don't want to be on the YouTube discussion. So because the groups are going to be randomly sorted, you may initially end up in that group. So if that's the case, just know that that's the random sorter on Zoom, and we can get you to where you need to go. But we won't be able to control that right at the beginning. Thanks.
But it looks like Connie and Alice, who did not want to be on YouTube, it looks like you're not in Isis's room. But yeah, if you end up in there for some reason. And then Njeri, if you could join room 1 when I start the breakout rooms, because you're host, I can't put you in there. But they're ready to open.
Okay, thank you.
You should get a notification now.
Have fun.
Thank you. I didn't realize I was on mute. So thank you, Jennifer. So first I'll start with like a check-in. What were some of our initial emotional responses, thought responses to the Patternmaster? And as you speak to that, was this a reread for you or first read for you? Because y'all know my thoughts, because I shared them.
I can go.
Excellent.
This was my first time reading it. And I really, really enjoyed it. It took this one specifically, I had to physically throw the book somewhere, or I would have just read it in one sitting, because the writing and the flow warranted that, I feel like. But participating in the slow read, you have to slow yourself down and really think about what you were reading and where you were, and how that all fits into the whole Patternmaster series. I really enjoyed it. I promise you, we need to do some fan fiction. I keep bringing that up with Njeri. I was like, there's so many elements of the world that you think about, even though it's complete as a story. And even if Octavia was still here, I don't think she would revisit the world. I think she did what she did for a purpose and a reason. But there's so much, I feel like you could go so much further in this world. And that's one of the things that really sits heavy on my heart. I'm just like, oh, but if this happened, this would be fire. But I really, really, really enjoyed it. I love the connection between the pattern and the abilities, and seeing the world of the mutes, or how they're functioning now versus Mind in My Mind. And then the clay arcs going a little further. I would have loved, like Njeri, I would have loved to see that developed a little bit more, but it's a smaller book. There's no way you can go that deep. But yeah, that's my initial thoughts. I really enjoyed myself. I enjoyed this whole experience of reading it together. 4 book, or is it 4 or 5 books? I forgot. 5 books,
including Survivor.
Together as a group, and it has been really rewarding from a reader's perspective, and I just really enjoyed myself.
Awesome. And before we transition to the next person, I want to call in a comment from YouTube. Pretty Brown Eyed Reader says, it was a first time read for me. I enjoyed this one, and it helped me understand the other books in the series more. So that's interesting. And Sharon says it was also her first read, and she felt like they were taken on a journey throughout. So other reactions, I was like, I'm just waiting for Jennifer to chime in.
I I enjoyed it. I read it a few months ago. I mean, I read it a while ago. So it's like I'm revisiting my notes. And to me, I think it was Currency. That was his name, right? He reminded me of Dora.
Yes.
And so, but to come to the last book, it was, or the first book, however it was in the order, it was, the ending was good, even though I felt like it was more. So, but I want to say ultimately Teray was supposed to finish because he wasn't the bad child, because it seemed like Teray was supposed to take over. That's who was it?
Rael
was waiting for. That's who he was holding out for. Currency just wanted Teray's power. So he wanted his mind. That's who he's waiting on. And so I think with him and the female that were traveling, they were trying to get there and to take his place, because he was going to give him his mind so that they can control what was going on, and I think do it in a peaceful way. I think I'm kind of finishing the story. Interesting. But in a sense, in my mind, that's what I'm thinking. They were going to finish. They were going to make it more peaceful so that everyone can be on an even playing field. What they call the mutes, the patterns, the clay arcs. So I think that's what I saw.
And I love that aspect. So, and before I respond to that, Pretty Brown is for fan fiction, I would explore future patternists, especially Teray and Amber's baby. So I love that. And I thought it was interesting, Rael saying, like, you're the one I was waiting for, because when we meet Rael in the beginning, this is also a person who killed 3 of his siblings to become the Patternmaster and had complete disregard for his own kids and was kind of had captured his lead wife / sister. So this is not somebody who I expect to have any morality, any empathy, right? To be quote unquote waiting for a more just leader. So I was like, really, Rael? Is that what was going on? And also, like, with Currency, like, his need for the pattern reminded me of Mary's need to keep expanding. And so I think because of that, I felt some sympathy. I think if there was any way he could find to keep Amber and Teray alive, I mean, granted, he was also dealing with his ego, he would have tried, because it would have been easy for Teray to come into his house. He bought him and like, I'm gonna kill Teray, right? But he didn't. I think either the power or that ability was compelling to Currency, but he was also like really scared. And also in a position where he couldn't just say, like, I feel really scared, right? And trying to protect himself. Anyway, so any other, so that was, and so I appreciate everybody's initial thoughts. Any other initial thoughts on the books? I have a bunch of questions, but yeah, I wanted to pause there. Okay. So while y'all think about that, I'm going to drop my first question in the chat. And Njeri started to allude to this one. I'll also drop it in the YouTube. So technically, if anybody in this meeting was dropped into the book on the Patternmaster, we would be mutes. Having read the book and knowing full knowledge of the Patternmaster, do you think that knowledge would impact how we would act as mutes within the pattern?
I would not do well at all, knowing that I was going to be mute, I think I would try to get out.
I would be murdered too, because there's no way.
You're no more mute
Controlling
than
my actions.
It sounds all too familiar to another state that I don't think I could participate in. No.
There you go.
Sounds like none of the three of us is a mute.
Yeah, no.
But you know, for the question, like, I think that this is interesting, because if you're a mute and you're reading about what patternists are going through and how they react and how they live and how they consider and have interturmoil on what actions they are not going to take, would be interesting, because then you put your position in and say, well, what would I do in that instance? Would I even consider contemplating fighting what's his name?
Cornsey?
I didn't listen to the audiobook this time. I've been in my head, I've been saying Corancy.
Corancy,
That sounds right. So Corancy, like, for me, as if I were a mute and I'm reading this story, I would be like, why are you even thinking about it? He can hear your thoughts. So it's like, be more proactively intentional about your actions and not talk about it. But as a story, you have to, because then we're not going to know. But that's what I would think if I were a mute. It's like, well, you're giving him all the information that he needs to fight you and win, because he's already saying he's stronger than you. He can beat you because you're sitting there contemplating on how to kill him and you don't have an option. So yeah.
It's almost like, it's like watching what is it, sci-fi or something, and you watch all these movies where they read your mind and you have to think in a way that they're not thinking. So it's outthink them in a sense.
Right.
Well,
it's reality, of course.
Me very much of 1984, which is what, at least 50 years in advance, 40 years in advance of this. And it also reminded me of the developments in The Lord of the Flies. You know, it was the same pattern of the boys being left on the desert island, and didn't they split into groups? And the least powerful group.
And I'm thinking, because like, I'm gonna meditate on The Lord of the Flies, because I was like, The Lord of the Flies was very traumatizing for me when I read it. But for 1984, I could see it like this society that's supposed to make everything better for everybody, but it really represses the rights of others. And I think the thing about, like, if you're a mute, what would you do? Because like the program,
we have to be a mute to live happily and, quote, enjoy and reap the benefits of this society, which is very much in Octavia Butler's book, isn't it?
Right. And so as a mute, like, I don't, like, you're so deeply programmed, right? And there was one passage in the book that was like, mutes who are captured by clay arts, who don't die of the disease, who aren't like killed outright, become some of the worst enemies of the Patternmaster, because once they're outside of the mind control, they realize how deeply they were enslaved, right? When you're in the house and you have all these patternists in your head, not only controlling your actions, but literally controlling your thoughts and your feelings, you're like making their food, like, and all this stuff, right? Where they're actually super vulnerable to you, but you don't even have access to your thoughts and emotions to be like, let alone to hide your thoughts. You can't even like access your thoughts to be like, I want to escape, which is scary. And I wonder how media and television does that today to underrepresent.
Did they film this book?
Patternmaster has not been made into a film yet, but I'm just thinking about general media in terms of internalized racism or sexism or so forth, homophobia.
I doubt it if they'll put this on television. It's not going to happen. it's going to be scary for some people. They might not be able to stomach
Oh,
this. But then again, they made Handmaid's Tale, so I don't know.
which is pretty scary. And some
Yes,
people,
that is scary. That's very scary.
and some people fell in love with it.
Well, I'm one of them because I do watch it, but it is scary.
I couldn't even read the book. I was so scared by it. It's pretty scary. So
Yeah.
I never watched it. I mean, I just, Margaret Atwood's book was enough to be getting on with. But yeah,
The show was very interesting.
really, if they wanted to, they could neutralize it or make it go in another direction or have a hero like Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise, God forbid. I mean, they could do all sorts of beautiful things. And probably it's better off.
Then we're talking something else that'd be almost like, and I hate to say it, whitewashing it. So we don't want them to do that.
And so I hate saying, because like if they did a movie about the Patternmaster and then leaned into the white savior trope, that would 100% be whitewashing. I also want to bring in Sharon's comment. When I loosely described the plot to my sister, she said the mutes were the 99% and the patternists were the 1%. I thought that was an interesting way to think about it, that invisible control of the 1% of the rest of society, which I think is a very interesting parallel. So as I tee up the next questions, any other thoughts on being a mute in this society?
Do you mean a physical mute, like where you really physically can't talk, or a psychological mute where you're not allowed to talk?
So a mute is how they described humans with no abilities in the book.
Humans with no abilities. Okay, because I had assumed you were reading the book aloud, so I'm moving. I haven't read it. I'm moving very cautiously.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, okay.
Stupid or incredibly like miles and miles away from this book, please tell me, because I've written it down to read. But I thought Octavia Butler's slow read meant literally that we were going to sit down and read a book aloud slowly, like the way people have groups reading Shakespeare or something like that. So please stop me if I say something incredibly stupid.
No, and so I appreciate that context. So slow read and that be together as a group. We're reading all the books by Octavia Butler. There are read-alongs. This is actually a discussion. So the whole program is called Slow Read, but we're not slowly reading.
Okay.
So and I think so with that awareness, like I think for most of the people in this group and particularly on YouTube, we're excited to actually discuss the book. So this may be an opportunity more for you to learn more about the themes of the book, right? And then so we can center the conversation on the book as BIPOC readers, if we can create that space as a community. So the next question and these again are books from the publishers. Okay, question number 10, which deals with gender and sexuality. So I'll copy that into the chat. Patternist women have the same psychic ability as the men, yet most of the female characters, Irate, Amber, Genesee, are still pressured to accept positions such as lead wife. Discuss sex and sexuality in the novel. How do they interact with power and social hierarchy? And to me, this is fascinating, but would love to hear other people's thoughts. It was one of the things I forgot to mention in my recap, in my reaction.
That's interesting. Discuss.
You want us to go
hierarchy? That's something we're going to come against in our next series, But that hierarchy thing, that's an interesting topic. But I'm gonna leave that one alone, because sexuality Men like to use sex against women. I'm just going to say that out loud.
But to be fair, do women use sex against men?
Well, I mean, yes, we do. But do we use it like they do?
Mhm.
And I think it's going, yes. I mean, that's a very complicated question. I think
It's very complicated.
Yeah.
on like the
Jessica,
hierarchy.
do you have a cat behind you?
No,
Sorry.
that is something that was I requested, but it's not a cat. I mean, Lord
Okay,
knows.
I
it's
have
not a
2
cat.
black cats. That's why I was
Yeah,
wondering.
I don't. I'm gonna be honest. I don't do cats. But no, it is a. This is a dog, and it's stuffed.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, it's something that belonged to my grandmother, and it has traveled. It has survived 25 years in the military. So no.
Whoa. It
So
deserves a retirement.
yes, I have retired, and it has survived because
It stayed with you, which
yes, because I used to get in trouble for touching it when I was a little girl. My grandfather would yell at me. So,
and and so since we only have like 45 minutes in the breakout room,
okay.
usually I'm really
So yes, we need to hurry.
Yeah,
We
I
have,
just want to like be for people who like, so going back to the question, for me, I thought it was you have these super powerful stories, even Amber and Teray, as much as he respected Amber, it took him a while to get to the point where it's like she wants more than to be anyone's lead wife, including
right.
and to like not move, like when she said no, and it was very like, no, maybe I'll think about it. It's like, no. His mind was like, oh, I just need to find the right words to convince her, as opposed to like, she don't want to be your lead wife any more than you want to be her lead husband. And that's fine. So I loved that Octavia Butler included that discussion, like why the assumption is that powerful women, the most they could aspire to was to be the wife of a powerful man. I appreciated the gentleness that she handled Amber's coming out to Teray and how much difficulty she had in coming out to other characters within the book, regardless of like, and how they found that as threatening, and how much she sacrificed to like live in her, like to come out as bisexual, which it seems because the character only speaks about men and women. So I appreciated both of those conversations. So any other thoughts about sexuality and or gender, those themes in terms of the book?
I thought it was great as well. I have to agree. I really like the intentionality she had with really having Amber stand her ground, because she was like, listen, when I'm with women, I'm attracted with women. When I'm with men, I'm attracted to men. So if you're gonna have a problem with that, tell me now, because we don't got time. We're trying to fight these clay arcs. So if you're gonna feel some kind of way, you need to tell me now.
Right.
Okay. That's more important. We need to stay alive. Like, I really like that. And she really is, has so much characteristics of, and Wahoo, I can never say her name right. Where she's like, I'm me and I'm independent and no one's going to put me in this little box. No one's going to tell me I don't want to just be someone's wife. I even liked, how I don't know if that was in the same chapter or in the same situation, but how she utilized that conversation and said, this is who I am. And let me just tell you, I love you, Teray, but let me tell you something. Because I love you, I'm gonna let you live. Because if it was between me, if it was anybody else, Carancy and you finna die, because I want to help. That's what I want, and that's what I'm gonna get. And I'm Team Amber, period, all day. At the end, I was like, if I wrote fan fiction, Amber is killing Teray, even though she loved him. Say, listen, you either give me the pattern or you're dead, because I could kill you. So they fight on the pattern or something. It needed to be Amber to get that pattern. But
right. And I love the fact that like Octavia includes that. Like when Carancy was dead, Carancy's people were like, who is going to lead? Will it be you, Amber, or you, Teray, right? And at the time, Teray was unconscious, right? Amber could have really been like, I'm about that life, like the pattern, like I'm next in the pattern, right? And for a Butler to write that to be Amber's decision, right? As well as Rael, I thought was powerful. Bringing in some comments from YouTube, Pretty Brown Eyed Reader says, it felt like a cult with the rules of who could mate with whom within the patternist society, which is fair. Like as an outsider, you had to get permission before you could mate with and like impregnate a woman. And Sharon says, my favorite moment was when Amber asked Teray to be her lead husband. I love how she detached herself from the mound idea of a woman in the patternist community. So true. And just like making that parallel, like Teray, are you trying to be my lead husband? Like, because I'll need one, right? And Teray not even considering that, like, what are you talking about? It's like, and I think Teray's experience with like Amber's experience with who she wanted to be her second Kai, and seeing that as a woman who was leading her own house and doing that successfully and having 15 years of her memories kind of informed the way she was able to move throughout the pattern. So yeah, so I really appreciated that discussion in that part of the book, especially considering like the book was written
in the 70s, right?
Where there's very different thinking about queerness, right? So
I think that's why I like that part where Amber was like, no, when I'm with women, I like women, and when I'm with men, I like men, because
she wanted that respect.
In the 70s, to say something like that, like, and make that really intentional is really interesting to read even now in the 2021s, you know, like, yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Right. And Sharon says, I'm concerned about the power dynamics between patternist mates with the mute. Do they even have autonomy? So that's kind of speaks to consent, right? If you're a patternist and you mate with the mute, is there a way where a mute can actually say yes? Because there's complete mind control, right? And we saw this in Mind of My Mind, where the guy that Mary would ultimately have kids with is sleeping with a mute, and he was trying not to mess with her mind too much, but ended up completely in her head. So what are our thoughts about consent between a patternist and a mute?
I think they could. I mean, if you give them their own mind, let them have their mind, and just say, hey, I'm gonna have sex with you.
Yeah, but if you give them a foothold of having that decision, you have to give them a foothold of other things. So that's why she's saying consent, because that's actually really interesting to bring up consent, because if you bring up consent for sex, but can you consent to other things? Like, I want to go on a walk. I don't want to do work right now. But you're not consenting to, you're made to do that.
It's interesting. It's like a vampire compelling someone to do something.
Yeah.
Compel you to do something. But you know, if I want to have sex with you, I'm gonna have sex with you, but I don't want you to make me have sex with you. That's, you know, it's like you gotta have some type of decency, let me put it that way, how they say, what's their word?
Finesse?
Say again?
Finesse?
No, it's not finesse.
Integrity?
Yes, integrity, but I can't think of it right now. You know, somebody is getting ready to die and they tell you to have some type of whatever. But anyway, you don't want to just take it and grab it.
Empathy?
In a sense, yes. I'm not just going to take something from somebody just because it's there.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, I agree with that, but it's a fiction novel, right? So it's
yeah, that's true. I get you. But I don't want to write it.
And these are the attributes or the characteristics that the author has given to her characters. So I get it. Like in real life, this would not in real life.
Yeah, that's true. Because I'm gonna beat you down. I'm gonna fight you.
Exactly.
I'm gonna bite the mess out of you. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she didn't really write that. Thank God. She didn't write that. So, I mean, I don't know.
Because if you really think about it, if you go back to the patternist, even Isis, and I know we're probably getting down to the wire, so let us know if we need to move on. But even within the patternist relations, Caranci, we can use him for an example. He actually compels that person and says, I want this woman. I want this woman now. And then the women are tricked. Not only do they have to consent, they have to. If you don't, you die.
Out of fear.
You have no other option. And when you're there, you love it, right? That is very Doro, right? They love it. So with Iray was like, I love Teray. I don't want to be with him. But it was like 2 weeks later, she's all in love with Caranci. And it's because she was made and her mind was warped to enjoy what was going on.
Yeah.
You know, and then she just completely changed her thought of who he was, because she's thinking, oh, I've seen him, I've been with him, but she doesn't realize, or at least in my opinion, she doesn't realize that her thoughts are being changed for her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was unfortunate for her. And
right.
And that's the sad part.
And it's kind of like with Iray, it's like her options were so limited, right? So it's like, did she actually?
You're not strong enough.
Yeah, and it's like, if she's not strong enough, like she couldn't take on Caranci by herself. Like, so did she like actually change her mind in light of the situation? Was she compelled to change her mind? Did she like all those questions are super valid, and it's like, I don't know. So bringing in Sharon's comment from YouTube, with the patterners specifically, they are power hungry. Caranci is an example. They want to make slaves of other patterners. I don't even think they treat mutes with any decency or respect as beings. And that's because that's as we're having a conversation, right? Think about Caranci and how he interacted with other patterners and how that trickles down to the mutes in a society that's so hard, in this patternist society that's so hierarchical. I think everybody was suffering, right? The patternmaster itself is like, so like, I need this pattern. He's suffering in his like pursuit for power. You know, pattern masters are like trying to like, we have Torres Ventura who like has his own house and they're relatively strong, but he's still a puppet for Caranci. And I feel like he's probably not the only one. And that level of oppression just kind of trickles down. Like, is anybody free in such a hierarchical society? I don't know. That's a hypothetical question. Then moving on, patterners and clay art stare at each other across a gulf of disease and physical difference, and have comfortably told themselves the same lie about each other. That lie that Teray's clay art had tried to get away with, not people. What similar examples of cognitive dissonance can you find in our own world? And I'll paste that in the chat.
That's interesting.
I'm taking it that you're based in the States. All of you? Yeah?
We're not sure about the other folks, but we all are.
Okay, I'm in Canada. And that's a very apropos question, because recently, many children's bones of Indigenous children's bones from maybe a century ago to maybe even the 60s, 70s were found at what we call residential schools, when essentially in the late 19th century, Indigenous children were taken from their parents to, quote, take the Indian out of them and put into these residential schools, where most of them were treated absolutely abominably. And we have been ignoring a lot of Indigenous basic human rights, a lot of Indigenous rights, saying things, not carrying through. And then these bones of children were discovered at I think 3 schools in British Columbia, 1 school in Manitoba, so Western provinces so far, but the Eastern provinces had them. And it's made an enormous storm, right? Because it hits to everybody's vulnerabilities, children. And all of a sudden, we're looking at these incredibly learned and wise societies, the Indigenous peoples, and saying, oh, we did do an awful lot of talking with the best of intentions, and then ignored it and didn't carry it out. So I'm finding that a great truism as applied here to Canada right now with what's going on. Maybe a bit like George Floyd over in the States had that impact. And yeah, I find that very true to our society. I don't know what record in general the United States had with treating their First Nations, your First Nations, I have no idea. But I would say that with any people who are not in a position, quote, of white power or power, there's a lot of benevolent ignorance.
So I posted a link to the article about the residential schools.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's something that I've been following for a while. It's hard to say that that's an example of cognitive dissonance because Europeans came to America, saw Native Americans, and were very active in warfare, both biological and traditional, and killing them. So like the residential schools was kind of a continuation of that.
It wasn't really ISIS because some of the story wasn't told. And what happened when the first explorers landed in Quebec, for example, was that the Indigenous who lived here in Montreal, and whatever other parts of Quebec, because I'm really shaky on my history here, but they helped these people to survive, actually. They would not have survived their first winter because they had never encountered winter.
Very similar to how it was in the US. So yes, I appreciate
history books.
That topic. I do want us to stay grounded in being open-minded and respecting different opinions. So any other thoughts on examples of cognitive dissonance in society that kind of mirrors what was going on between the Patternists and the Clay's arc?
Well, from my point of view, if we go back to the comment that was made on YouTube where they were talking about that 99% is probably mutes versus the 1% is the Patternists. If you think about just the Western world, because this isn't just the United States, but the Western world and how they treat anyone not Black, right? I mean, anyone not white. Anyone who is not in that power, that's really how, it's like, oh, we'll have all of these initiatives. We'll have Black Lives Matter. We'll have Asian Lives Matter or Asian anti-hate and, First Nations things, this, that, and the other set up or talked about, but it's explained away and it's kind of washed away, but nothing changes.
Exactly.
So I think that, we can only kind of think about how Octavia Butler would think there because we wouldn't be able to see it on the page with the Patternmasters. We don't know, are the mutes actually able to have those engaging conversations and say, what you're doing here is wrong. Like, can I do that? And will you listen to me? But because you have power over me, I'm not even able to voice that, think that, because you can alter my ability or you can kill me. So how much can I really be sensitive to and bring to your table as the housemaster or whomever I'm under at the time to really voice my opinion? Like a perfect example in the book was when we were introduced to Amber as the healer. The woman was being raped by one of the people, right? And he was physically abusing her to the point where no one was helping this woman. And here comes Teray, who actually has a heart, saying, why is no one helping this woman? I know I'm a patternist, but why is nobody helping her? Nobody's helping her. What's really going on? But that's it. It takes that level of person who is a part of the 1% to make the change. So
Yes.
you know, those are my thoughts.
And that's
so
the
I'll go ahead and bring in
Oh.
Sharon comment from YouTube. So she's in Kenya, as we all know, East Africa. In my context, there are many of those stereotypes across tribes we have over here, over 42 different tribes. And between Kenyans and foreigners like whites and Indians. And in her case, she means Indians from India, not Native Americans. So in Pretty Brown Eyes also says in America, the idea of people who are immigrants as aliens. So that's actually a really good one because, you know, unless you're Native American in the US, you are an immigrant. But to then kind of have that divide between more recent immigrants and some of the legislation against some of those populations' rights can be rooted in a lot of cognitive dissonance.
I am sorry.
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. I am getting the impression that the patternists, physicians, were quite as vulnerable and as dangerous as the people, the other person's quote beneath them. Do you think that's true?
Jennifer Jersey from
It's really
Patrice,
difficult
I don't know.
to have the courage of that character to speak up and say what is happening here, even if he was in that quote 1%, the patternist.
Yeah.
Some
So,
ways, yes.
what do y'all think about that?
It could only take it takes one person to or maybe more to probably make a mistake so that they could be ripped apart. It's doable. It's just with anything, just like with the dissension in the US. You know, we had this problem with you have the privilege with the unprivileged.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all it takes is us coming together and fighting the right way. You know, it's like it's unfortunate, but it's happening, and until there's something done about it, it's going to keep happening.
It's going to keep happening.
You have to pay attention to what's going on. You know, right now we have voting rights and the washing of history.
And we have 26 seconds. So sorry.
We done took everything.
Yeah. So Danielle, Eleni, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right. I know you're off camera and on mute, but I have 10 seconds if you want to say anything. Thank you so much for a great and engaged discussion. People in the group and also people in YouTube land. This is a lot of work managing both these channels.
Imagine.
I really enjoyed meeting my fellow mutes.
And we're back.
Yes. I got this note that said you are muted now. And I'm like, Zoom, you can't be bringing up any about into my life like that. So yes, apologies to anybody who was unceremoniously like taken out of the room mid-sentence. That was me. But we are back. So at this point, we usually take a minute or so, probably maybe 2 to 3 minutes per group, if folks want to share a little bit of what they were able to discuss in the small group discussion. So and does anybody want to go first? Any of the group discussion leaders?
I mean, I can go.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
We spoke about a lot actually in this time. And even though we had much more time than the last time, we still got caught up mid-sentence, as Njeri said. But for the most part, we looked at the way that Octavia used the Patternmaster series to show how similar our society is to this fictional world. Like if you look at the way like women are restricted in this particular book as compared to Wild Seed, where like Anyanu was far more free and was more community based and she loved people and she cared for people. She was a mothering, nurturing person who looked at people as not just a resource or a weapon, but as somebody who can be a part of a collective that can move society forward, as compared to like Doro and what was his name? Karansi, who just looked at people as some resource that they can use to achieve whatever megalomaniac ideations that they had. And I really enjoyed that discussion with KL. And we also looked at the way KL brought up this amazing analogy where she said that the modern patterners, they create, but they're not creative. They have lost a lot of their creativity because they only look at creation as how can I make something or do something that can advance me and my house, rather than how can I use my abilities to become something else and become greater than I already am, because they think they are already great. And that is a severe limitation to their own progress. And we see how far they've backslided throughout the centuries because they don't think that anything can be better than them as they are right now. So yeah, that's just 2 points that we brought up, and I'll leave the rest to you.
Thanks. Yeah. Others?
Yeah, we talked about a lot, and it was great. But one of the things that we talked about was along the same lines of what Nikita was sharing with they don't create. And we spent some time talking about how they have the ability to absorb memories and to see the interactions and things that other people in the community have gone through, and yet they do nothing with that information. And they're living, but they're not existing. And then also the different kind of love that is evidenced in relationships that is shown in this story, and how interesting I'll say that, how interesting those interactions are. And when we came back, we were ending with the discussion of if you were placed into this story and you had the choice, who would you like to be in this story? And it was a resounding Team Amber from everyone. If anyone would like to chime in and add more to my summarization of our discussion, feel free to do so.
So in our group, so I think we discussed a lot of things, including like comments from YouTube. Jennifer and Latrice had a lot of good comments on like, what does consent look like, particularly between mutes and the patternist, and what would it be to operate in the society as a mute? In general, the consensus is that we would try to get away, but also with that awareness is that like, you're so devoid and removed from your own thoughts. Like, how do you even begin to plan that escape when people around you are reading your thoughts? We also talked about like modern day parallels between the patternist hierarchy. So like the 1% being the patternist and like the 99% being the mutes, and like what are some means of control that are parallel to mind control in this story. So those are some of the things that we talked about. I really enjoyed the conversation and kind of bringing parallels to like what's going on today and lessons that they taught. As a group, we really appreciated and admired Amber and the way Butler wrote her with such strength. And for many of us, that reminded us of the character of Anwanyu, not Emma, in Wall C. So we had great insight from Sharon and Pretty Brown Eyed Reader. That's her name on YouTube. I'm not flirting with her, even though I'm sure she has pretty brown eyes, in the comments. So if I missed anything, please feel free to chime in, but I enjoyed the conversation.
I'll go next. Thanks, Isis. So we had a great conversation. I'm sure all the conversations in all the groups are really great. I really enjoyed our conversation. We talked a lot about a lot of different things. Definitely, we spent some time talking about Amber. Definitely hashtag Team Amber right now. Somebody make a t-shirt. And I feel like with Amber, there was so much like her as a healer and as a creatrix. That was such a powerful part of the story, and left people asking questions about like, well, what's next, and what could Amber's role be in terms of like the evolution of the pattern. So that's already been talked about. We also talked about Teray's journey, rite of passage, Teray's transformation from leaving the indoctrination of the school to going to Karansi's house, and then the journey along the way to Forsyth, and that the Teray that ended up the Teray that ended up on his way to Forsyth was not the same Teray that left the school, and how Amber was instrumental in shaping, because we all change each other, right? So shaping Teray along the way. And we also talked about like it was interesting that there were these moments along their pathway where they were near the water and in caves, and those places are places of change and power in different religions. And Octavia E. Butler, as being a student of religions and theology, maybe there was something baptismal about Teray walking in the water with his horse and Amber, and maybe the changes that came after that were changes that came through that kind of like self-initiation, self-ritual as he changed. We also talked about the stereotypical and discriminatory views of different groups and asked the question, can the patternist way of seeing things be trusted? Are patternists reliable narrators? Because we learn about the Clayarchs through the patternists, we learn about the mutes through the patternists, we learn about the patternists through the patternists. So, just because they're the tellers of the story, does that mean we trust that story? So what does it mean to step back a little bit from that and to explore the world? We also talked about a sadness, perhaps, or a disappointment that the last book was a book in which a cis man was in control yet again. And so after all of this time, this is where we we had all these great characters, and this is where we end up. We're still penis on top, how that happened. And so we talked about how we got there and what that potentially meant. So it was a yes, and at least Teray has a heart. And we did talk about, it's not fair to say that it was full circle, because Teray is not Doro. And if we did a study on Teray and Doro, we would come up with tons and tons and tons of differences. We also had a very interesting conversation about Amber's pregnancy, autonomy, like fertility and autonomy, and power in that particular moment, and the awesome scenes of her healing herself without the help of anyone else, and that incredible power. So it was just a really amazing discussion. So thank you very much to our group for the the wonderful conversation. I'll pass it on to you, Regina Renee.
Thank you. So I want to thank Allison, Sylvia, Lori, Catherine, Tom. We too, like everyone else, had a great conversation. We started by just talking about characters that intrigued us, that we'd want to know more about. And yes, like many of you, Team Amber, but also looking at Jancy and how from the beginning, we only have a very short time with her, but how her influence is felt throughout the book, especially as we come to the end, pretty much full circle with the very beginning. And looking at the themes in the book and looking specifically at freedom and how we only get one line as far as just like, what do you want with that freedom? Of course, you know, they wanted to be freedom from currency, but freedom to do what? And that freedom to piece for Teray was freedom to learn. And just as a person of African descent and what that means to be free to learn was very powerful for me. And so we were just talking about freedom from and freedom to, and also what that means as far as the sexuality in the book. And it's like freedom from this current partner to be with this other partner as I see fit, when I see fit. But it also led to conversations about opening and vulnerability and shielding and, you know, the physical rape aspects of the book with the mental rape and how that occurs and when that occurs. And so basically being called to question about what is going on and what do we learn and what is Octavia E. Butler trying to teach us and what is normalized. And so just taking that whole notion of community and where you are in the community and what are the pros and cons of each piece and how much awareness do you have of your place in the community and which part of the community are we talking about? You know, the outsiders, the outcasts had their own community, the mutes have their own community, but what does it mean in the pattern, if anything at all? And so defining community for ourselves and our roles in it. And our little group was its own community within this larger community that we love of the OEB slow read. And so we had two newcomers and they were welcomed enthusiastically. And yeah, this is a wonderful place and space to experience Octavia Butler. So we talked a little bit about that too.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we are, I think we're at the time for the selfie, and just to give a heads up to B, I know B's been with us so far in our discussion. I think it would be good to do be your performance before the sound circle. So just if you could just let us know in the chat, you can do a private chat if you're ready to go after we do the selfies. So for those of you who are new, the selfie is just that, we take a picture. So great, B, thank you. So if you would like to be in the photograph, please get your copy of the book, or if you have it on your phone or whatever, and hold it up. And fun fact, the hosts are all wearing like Patternmaster inspired clothing and outfits. I decided to be the harvest instead of Patternmaster because I couldn't find my one purple shirt today, probably in the laundry. But yes, so if you can get ready for the photo, and then I will see if I can. Yes, I can. Okay. And of course, if you don't want to be in the photo, oops, sorry, false alarm, 1 second. Okay, let's see. Okay, we're taking the, sorry.
Jerry, should we ask Sade to take the picture so then
Yes.
you can help?
Yes, can you do that?
Yeah, I can do that.
Oh, sorry. I have 2 screens and it's just not working for me, so I'll just do what I do best.
I'll count down. So 1, 2, 3. And I'll do another one. 1, 2, 3. All right, I'll send those over after.
Thank you, Sade, and thank you, Isis, for that necessary pivot. All right, so B, you're up next, and if you could, Sade, if you could go to the slideshow with B's photograph and bio, so that I can introduce.
Yay! Be Stedwell. Okay. Excellent. So one of my happiest things in life is introducing B. Stedwell. So for those of you who do not know, B. Stedwell is a talented musician and filmmaker. If you have not watched Vow of Silence, go get your whole life right after this, go watch it. And storyteller from Washington, D.C. In their live performances, she uses looping, vocal layering, and beatboxing to compose her songs on stage. B's original music features earnest lyricism and affirming LGBT content. One of my favorite songs is Gay Sex. If you can probably guess, it's about gay sex and how that can be used as a political tool, and I'm here for it. B's goal as a musician is to make other Black girls, queers, introverts, and generally marginalized weirdos feel seen and loved. Don't you feel loved right now? I feel loved. In 2019, B composed the music for Alvin Ailey's dance company's production of The Be Gone, and later that year, B wrote and directed a musical, A Letter to My Ex. If I could create a play called A Letter to My Ex. Anyway, the play was amazing. Go watch that as well. B's musical tells the story of love narrated one character's journey through the year following a breakup. In 2020, B released her newest album, Succulent. During the pandemic, you can find B. Stedwell on her Patreon channel, patreon.com/B Stedwell. The best way to support is via Patreon, or you can, I think this is, find me at bstedwell@bstedwell.com. So B. Stedwell has created an original piece inspired by the Patternmaster, and we'll be performing that and an original piece inspired by Wild Seed now.
Thank you, Isis. I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing space, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you give me a thumbs up? Yes, okay. I was gonna start with the song I wrote for Wild Seed, and then I was gonna sing the Patternmaster song. Okay. follow me. You know that I'm finally happy, gonna swim deep somewhere that you can find me. Don't follow me. Gonna be all right. So this is the next one I'm going to do is one that I wrote sort of based on my thoughts on the Patternmaster, and it is brand new, so I'm still kind of getting used to it. So just give me one moment to get my key, if that's okay. Doom. Okay, got it. Doom chick doom chick doom chick doom 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 There's a beast in the dark. When the sun goes down, you can hear her call. There's a beast in the dark. She's a slave to her hunger, a slave to her heart. On the ground there's a man. He is building and plowing and working the land. On the ground there's a man. He's a slave to his master, the task still at hand. There's a hero on the hill, and she knows how to climb, how to fight, how to kill. There's a hero on the hill. She's a slave to the pattern, and her own self-will. There's a king on the throne. He is still as a mountain, he's turning to stone. There's a king on the throne. He is a slave to his fear, which he carries alone. There is you, there is me. We are monsters and men, we are heroes and kings. There is you, there is me. We are slaves to our master, our hunger, our things. There is me and there's you. You could tear me apart if ever you choose. There is you, there is me. Walking side by side, I feel some kind of free. Okay. Thanks.
Oh my
Thanks,
gosh.
That was beautiful.
Oh
Thank
my
you.
gosh. I just, ooh.
I appreciate that, y'all. Really, truly.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's very, very special, B, that you opened us through this journey and that you ended us as well. And that for, I mean, for those of us who are kind of feeling like, how do I feel post Patternmaster? I feel like we've been held in music in this whole journey. And just listening to both of the pieces back to back, has me, maybe others, thinking about like other ways to engage her work. And I love the together despite the pattern, like I feel some kind of free, right? And that's beautiful. So thank you very, very much. And of course you're welcome to stay. But I also know that you have a Sunday as well ahead. So do what you got to do. Thank you so, so much. So the next part, this is a really nice segue into the sound circle. I know that some of us need recovery time, which is great. So Tati, are you good with explaining how the sound circle works?
I think so. I am affected at the moment. Okay.
I can do it too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can also do it. Just let me know.
Isis, you want to do it?
Happy to. So the sound circle is another way we get to interact with Octavia Butler's work in this discussion, Patternmaster, where we do it popcorn style. You pick your favorite passage from the book and you read it aloud. So you share it. There's no crosstalk during it. You just read it, let it drop, and then when you are ready, you can share your passage and we'll just go until we stop or the allotted time has expired, whichever comes first. So yeah, whoever wants to read, you can start or you can raise your hand and then Njeri will call on you. And yeah, and that's how we kick off.
No call on, just start. Sorry.
Okay,
Just
start. Thank you. And jump in now because in a couple minutes it'll be hard. It'll be like playing double dutch, like when I get in. So
the mutes would have made a ceremony, a funeral. Mutes were ceremony-making creatures. Patternists had left such things to them for so long that there were almost no patternist ceremonies left. For a funeral, ancient words would have been said, and the body consigned to the earth with quiet dignity. Even patternists who thought no more of mutes than they did of draft animals attended such ceremonies with respect. They had become the due of any patternist or mute who died, a time for friends, husbands, and wives to pay last respects. The 10 who had belonged to Corency, who now belonged to Teray, would have appreciated it.
Teray opened his mouth to give him a defiant no, but somehow it was not that easy to say the word that could condemn him. He closed his mouth and stared down at his plate. Finally, he found his voice. I can't. The two words were so shamefully much weaker than the one would have been that he felt compelled to say more, to redeem himself. What's the point of buying my life with the one thing I still have that makes it worth living? Go ahead and kill me.
When I meet a woman who attracts me, I prefer women, she said. And when I meet a man who attracts me, I prefer men. You mean you haven't made up your mind yet? I mean exactly what I said. I told you wouldn't like it. Most people who ask me want me definitively on one side or another.
Teray looked at Amber and read not only weariness, but bitterness in her face. Hold on. He realized abruptly that the bargain that he and Corency had made in no way included her. She had fled from Red Hill because Corency had denied her independence, tried to hold her against her will, and now she was his again. At least Teray had a chance for freedom, but she was caught unless she wanted to try against Corency her healer's talent for swift murder, and she had already admitted that she was afraid of him.
I'm an independent, Lord, she spoke with slight hoarseness. I'm an independent because most people realize how much trouble I can cause them if they try to hold me. You think I don't, after 2 years? I think you haven't thought about it enough. That sounds like a warning. Good. At least you know me well enough to understand that much.
she looked at her for a long moment, one eyebrow lifted. I think you're telling the truth, which is surprising. Corency wants to pattern the way you and I want to go on breathing. It's just about that basic. If somebody stopped me from healing, I might be the way he is now, climbing the walls.
Patternist and Clayarch stared at each other across a gulf of disease and physical difference and comfortably told themselves the same lie about each other. The lie that Therese Clayarch had tried to get away with. Not people.
Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell him? If he understood, he might not have had to die.
He was too much aware of the link, aware of a strong ongoing sense of oneness with her. Any kind of contact with Amber had to be different, had to be too close. There was nothing for him to do but accept it. And surprisingly, it was not that hard to accept. He felt himself relaxing almost against his will, felt the anger and the hurt that E-Ray had caused him ebbing, not vanishing completely, but retreating, shrinking so that it no longer occupied his whole mind. And Amber was not doing it, was not reaching into him through the link to offer unasked for healing. It was her mental presence alone that he was responding to. Her presence was eclipsing emotion that he would normally have taken much longer to get over, and he was enjoying it. He should have felt resentful at even this small invasion. Instead, he only felt curious.
I should have followed through, said Teray, even though he was ready for me. It has to happen soon anyway. Amber said nothing. It will be harder than ever now. He looked at her. Her face was too carefully expressionless. Whatever it is, say it. Just something you should be aware of. Yes, you made a good kill just now, but you went after the wrong animal.
The pattern rippled with her sorrow.
Teray, seemingly bodiless, only a point of light himself in this mental universe, discovered that he could change his point of view without seeming to move. He was suddenly able to see the members of the pattern not as star-like points of light, but as luminescent threads. He could see where the threads wound together into slender cords, into ropes, into great cables. He could see where the cables joined, where they coiled and twisted together to form a vast sphere of brilliance, a core of light that was like a sun formed of many suns.
You've come here because they think you're a god, and you won't even bother to let them in out of the cold. They get exactly what they expect from me, Jancy, the assurance of good health, long life, and protection from abuse by their masters. Making a religion of their gratitude was their own idea.
Take him by
What I
surprise.
want. I want what I want. I could have given my life for you back there if we had had to fight, but I could never give my life to you.
Take him by surprise. I probably couldn't anyway. Besides, if you want our link broken, you don't have to ask. You can just break it. I don't want to. I should, for your sake, but I don't want to. I want you with me. He only looked at her, loving her, wanting her, knowing that somehow he had to take her from Koransi, as he had to have his own freedom. He had to have her.
He held Jackman trapped, isolated from contact with the rest of the house. He had the foolish urge to apologize to Jackman for what he was doing as he tapped and absorbed the ma'am's memories of the previous 5 years. He wasn't doing to Jackman quite what Karasen wanted to do to him, but he was invading Jackman's mental privacy. He was throwing his weight around, acting like a lesser version of the housemaster. And he wasn't even doing it solely for the good of the mutes. They were important, of course. But Teray was also avoiding a promised beating and a cattle herding assignment. Things were bad enough.
They wouldn't have to kill each other. He gave a mental shrug. I didn't have to kill two brothers and a sister to get where I am. Oh, excuse me, did not have to kill two brothers and a sister to get where I am. Won't at least some of my children and yours be eager to inherit power as I was? He felt her try to pull away from him and knew that he had won a point. He held her where she was. Two brothers and a sister, he repeated. And it could easily have been two sisters if my strongest sister had not been wise enough to ally herself with me and become my lead wife.
Ray stood where he was, wondering how a Clayark had managed to recognize him as Rael's son. Well, Caranci had said Teray looked like Rael, and the Clayarks had gotten a good look at Rael once years before. Some of them had even lived to tell about it. Perhaps one of them had lived to draw a picture. Disease carriers that they were, they had deliberately mutilated Rael, bitten him to give him the only disease that no patternist healer could cure, the Clayark disease. Were they now seeking out his children, his possible heirs, to do the same to them? Was that why they had come raiding at Caranci's house to begin with?
You've got a better healer sitting next to you, and she'll always be a better healer. You won't ever surpass her in healing skill, and she won't ever surpass you in strength. There are plenty of better healers, but no stronger healers, and no weaker healer could survive what you just survived. You have the right combination of abilities.
Teray winced away from the idea. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell him? If he understood, he might not have had to die. I wouldn't have sacrificed one of Jancy's sons if he hadn't had to die. Do you really think anyone could have talked him out of wanting the pattern? You could have, perhaps. Young one, me least of all. Think. The only thing that kept him from attacking me outright to take the pattern was the belief that it would have come to him without a struggle if he waited a little longer.
Rael jerked the pattern sharply and Jancy jumped, gasping at the sudden disturbance. It was comparable physically to a painless but startling slap in the face. You see, he said, I've just awakened several thousand patternists by exerting no more effort than another person might use to snap his fingers. Sister wife, that is power worth killing for. Jancy radiated sudden anger. She thought of her sons fighting, and her mind filled with bitter things to say about his power. But the pointlessness of verbalizing them to him, of all people, undermined her anger. Not to me, she said sadly, and I hope not to my sons. Let them save their savagery, their power for the Clayarks. She paused.
They had been known to eat patternists, in fact. But a patternist was an expensive meal costing many Clayark lives. The eating was ritualistic anyway, done for quasi-religious reasons rather than out of hunger. Clayarks consumed patternist flesh to show, symbolically, how they meant someday to consume the entire race of patternists.
She smiled. Would I have saved you if I wanted them that badly? You know they're yours. His whole house is yours. Did you want it at all? A house like that? If you had been anyone else, Teray, you and Carancy would have burned together.
What she handed him made him feel as though he had suddenly been dropped into a cesspool. He digested the list of atrocities weekly, revising his thinking. He had thought Jason an animal for what he had done to Suliana. Now he knew that alongside some others, Jason could qualify as the house humanitarian.
He waited too long to ask me. He waited until I'd gotten to know him. Teray laughed softly. She had given him a kind of victory. Not a large victory, but one he could savor. One that Carancy's humiliations could not destroy.
Are we complete? And that was the sound circle. The last sound circle for the Patternist series, the last sound circle for this leg of the OEB slow read. Thank you, everybody, for reading and listening and witnessing the sound circle. So Sade, if you can give us the slide presentation again, please. Next book. Tati or Isis, do you want to go ahead with that?
Yes, I got it. I'm excited. Our next book is Dawn, the beginning of the Xenogenesis trilogy. When Lilith Iapo wakes from a centuries-long sleep, she finds herself aboard the vast spaceship of the Oankali. She discovers that the Oankali, a seemingly benevolent alien race, intervened in the fate of the humanity hundreds of years ago, saving everyone who survived a nuclear war from a dying, ruined Earth, and then putting them into a deep sleep. After learning all they could learn about Earth and its beings, the Oankali healed the planet, cured cancer, increased human strength, and now they want Lilith to lead her people back to Earth. But salvation comes at a price. Hopeful and thought-provoking, this post-apocalyptic narrative deftly explores gender and race through the eyes of characters struggling to adapt during a pivotal time of crisis and change. So that is our next book for the slow read, and our next live chat will be Sunday, September 26th. And the next slide. All right, here is our reading schedule for the slow read. There are many of you who know and participate in Njeri's slow reads that she does on her channel. So for Dawn, the next slow read, the first one will be September 17th. And then these are Fridays, right? Yes, Friday, September 17th, Friday, September 24th, and Friday, September 25th, just in time for the live show on Sunday, September 26th.
It's Friday,
Excuse me, Saturday.
Friday, Saturday.
Yes, I know days. As soon as I said Sunday after, yes, that. Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday. And also, you can purchase your merchandise for the Slow Read from SistahSciFi, the wonderful Isis Isare, who is our co-host. Her website is SistahSciFi.com. She has all of the books that we have read thus far, as well as the next 3 books. I mean, she's got all of the books, period. She's got all of the books. But if you don't have Dawn yet, you can get Dawn, order it from SistahSciFi, as well as other merchandise.
So just a reminder, we haven't sent out the survey for the past couple of slow reads. We've updated it, so it now has a drop-down menu. It's going to be the same survey each time, and you'll just choose from the menu which date you attended. We would love to receive your feedback, and once we get your feedback, we will do whatever we need to do to make this as enjoyable an experience for everybody as possible. So please look out for that. And you can also give feedback for past slow reads if you would like to as well. You'll have the option to do so. And we will be resuming the prizes at the next slow read. So check your email after today. I'll do that too. So feel free to keep in touch with us. So thank you for coming. Thank you. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Please keep in touch with us. For those of you who are here, if you're watching through YouTube, if you want to receive the link to join through Zoom, register through Eventbrite. And it's also good to be registered through Eventbrite because as there are other events that are coming up, or if you want the links to the slow read sessions or things like that, you'll be on the mailing list. And also, if you do not want to be on the mailing list, the easiest way to get off of the mailing list is to just refund your ticket for the slow read, and then you won't get emails from us. So that's how you can manage your flow of information. Yes, so Tatiana and I both have YouTube channels. Hers is Musical Tati, mine is Onyx Pages. We would love it if you would subscribe, and that's another way you can keep in contact with us. Also, you can follow the Slow Read over Twitter. You can also follow the Slow Read on Instagram as well. So those are ways that you can keep in touch. Also, SistahSciFi has a vibrant Instagram with a lot of information about their events. You can also get on the mailing list for SistahSciFi to find out about a number of events. I think today there's a graphic novel discussion of World of Wakanda, I think. I don't know if it's already happened today, but there is amazingness happening on SistahSciFi, including N.K. Jemisin in conversation with, I don't remember who is the person facilitating the conversation, but amazing things happening throughout the summer. So you can connect also to SistahSciFi as well through the socials. I don't know whose that was. Isis, do you want to take this one? It's Mickey.
Yeah.
Okay.
Happy to take this one. So if you're like, oh my God, there's still so much stuff that I want to talk about, or you just want to hang out with other Octavia E. Butler stands, you can hang out at the lounge, which is this Zoom space. Hopefully this Zoom space will be here for another 10 to 40 minutes, depending on how hungry you get and how many people hang out. And so you get to hang out with me and Tati. And Njeri, because you saw
for a little while, yeah.
Okay.
We can just over to the person who can stay the longest.
Okay. And Njeri for a little while. So yeah, you can hang out in the OEB Slow Read Lounge after this.
So thank you. So everyone, let me just put this back to gallery mode. All right, so we are finished with our live show for today. So does anybody who has attended want to say anything to the large group before we pivot, turn off, we'll stop recording, we will sever the link. There will no longer be a link between us and YouTube, and then we will have this space on Zoom, a more intimate and private space to like freak out. So anybody want to share anything before we say goodbye for now?
I just want to say congratulations to all three of you for putting together this thing for all of us to engage with. It has been a wonderful experience. And you guys need to have some kudos on your end for doing this because it has been successful and it has been beautiful. Thank you so much.
Agree. Wonderful, wonderful experience.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone. All right, we are gonna close formally for now. We are gonna stop recording. We're gonna stop being live streaming on YouTube. So for those in the YouTube chats, thank you for being here and for connecting with ISIS during the breakout discussions, and have a great rest of your Sunday.